back to the regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. It's 1:30 on Tuesday, July 28th, 2025. Continuing along with our agenda, we go into our item 9, our Health and Human Services item, which is a work session and order for the Navigation Center on River Avenue for board assignment dated 5/20 of 2025. And with us, I believe James Yola is with us and Kate Budd, our Human Services Division Manager. And I'll turn the microphone on the table over to you two. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, good afternoon, Commissioner. Thanks for having Kate and I here this afternoon to discuss the River Avenue Navigation Center. I know many of you have had constituents that have been reaching out recently regarding the Navigation Center, so happy to be here and talk through the history of the Nav Center, addressing some of the concerns that I know you all are hearing and some potential steps for moving forward. So I'm going to briefly go over the history, the purpose, some of the current neighborhood challenges, and then Kate's going to provide some contract options for moving forward for you all. And then there's some data that we have pulled for analysis, primarily data from the Eugene Police Department over the last 5 years. And so I want to dig into that and look at some potential trends there. So just as a reminder for you all, the Nav Center was opened in September of 2022. It was a partnership between the City of Eugene and Lane County. It has been operated since its opening by Equitable Social Solutions, also referred to as ESS. And the Nav Center's focus is really providing support to adults who need assistance getting into permanent housing. And so they provide 75 beds of congregate shelter at their location to individuals that are primarily prioritized for referral from the coordinated entry system to our permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing programs. In April of this year, we had another RFP, or request for proposal process, and ESS was again selected to be the provider for the Nav Center out of a total of 4 applicants that applied for that RFP. So when you look at the Navigation Center model, Navigation Centers are a national model that's used. It's a national best practice. It's an evidence-based best practice. And really, when you look nationwide at Navigation Centers, they are incredibly successful. Closer. Closer to this.
Oop, you need to turn it right on the side, the outer bin.
With your elbow.
There you go.
Thank you. So when you look at Navigation Centers across the country and also locally, the outcomes to housing are incredibly high. As a model, when you compare it to more traditional shelter models, Navigation Centers really are case management intensive. So when you think about the traditional shelter model, oftentimes that's folks showing up at night needing a bed, leaving in the morning, and there's not a lot of time to connect them to really in-depth case management services. With the Nav Center being a referral-based shelter where the only way to gain access to a bed at the Navigation Center is through referral from coordinated entry, that means that folks are really engaged in being there for a period of time while they're working towards housing, and that allows ESS to provide that really in-depth case management. Because of that connection to coordinated entry, Navigation Centers, compared to traditional shelter models, have just direct pathways to housing that traditional shelters don't have. And so with that, they're able to more quickly move folks from experiencing homelessness to housing. And oftentimes you'll see with traditional shelter model that there's higher levels of requirements or rules for access. So there's oftentimes requirements around treatment, not being able to bring pets, not being able to bring belongings, partners, etc. And with the Navigation Center being a low or lower barrier shelter, folks are able to access without mandated treatment, without having to leave their pets or service animals or their partners out on the street while they access shelter. So we see that folks with higher barriers and higher vulnerabilities are able to access a Navigation Center model where with traditional shelter models they haven't been able to access. Have gotten questions from folks about why is the Navigation Center low barrier? So there's two primary reasons. One being that best practice piece that I mentioned, and the second being that the current funding for the Nav Center is the Oregon Housing and Community Services, or Oregon state funding, and that funding source requires that the Nav Center be low barrier. And the OHCS specific language around what needs to be met for a shelter to be considered low barriers is here on the screen. Sobriety and treatment need to be voluntary. There can't be any required documentation of identification or citizenship or gender. And then taking that a step further, they need to ensure that the services are available to all individuals and families, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or marital status. And then that piece around pets and animals, low barrier shelters need to be able to accommodate individuals' pets and their belongings. There should never be a charge associated with staying at a low barrier shelter, whether that be paying a nightly fee, paying a fee for meals or services rendered. And low barrier shelters can't exclude folks with criminal convictions, poor credit, or eviction histories. So often what we say is that low barrier is about screening people into services rather than screening people out. So it's finding ways to be able to connect, again, with those highest vulnerability, highest barrier folks to ensure that we're getting them into a shelter that we can then provide that case management and work with them on moving out of homelessness and into permanent housing. Another common misconception that I've heard from folks that aren't familiar with a low barrier model is that they assume there's no rules, that it's a free for all, that there's not expectations put on residents, and that's simply not the case. There are a variety of policies and expectations that are put on folks that are residing at the Navigation Center. At intake, after folks are referred through coordinated entry, they complete a resident intake packet, which includes a myriad of expectations and behavior guidelines that they need to agree to, as well as kind of just what they can expect from the NAV Center. So when meals are served and when they can expect to be able to do laundry and shower. Within those intake packets, there's a variety of policies and guidelines, some of which are mentioned here. But I think the most important key ones to highlight are that every resident of the NAV Center is expected to be safe and respectful of everyone in the building. That includes themselves, other residents, and staff. Respecting the facility itself and the belongings of other individuals, maintaining the cleanliness of dorms. Again, being a congregate setting, there's shared common areas that all the residents share, and so ensuring that they're contributing to the cleanliness of those areas is super important. Another misconception is that drug or alcohol use and or possession is allowed on site, and that is absolutely not the case. Individuals who are found to have drug or alcohol in their possession, there are consequences up to and including discharge from the facility. Additionally, they can't have visitors at the shelter or show up outside the shelter, loitering, waiting for them to come out and talk to them. And the NAV Center staff, I'm going to touch a little bit on their security efforts on a later slide, but NAV Center staff really work to ensure that there isn't loitering happening off-site of the NAV Center. Individuals who have service animals or pets are responsible for those animals, whether it be crating them at night, keeping them on leashes. There's behavior expectations for the pets themselves. They can't be biting folks or being aggressive. And the unsafe behaviors extend. I think it's really important to just again highlight it extends outside of the walls of the center itself. So it's the neighborhood as well. And all of the residents sign what's called a good neighbor agreement, which basically the crux of it is that all of the policies and guidelines that they're agreeing to inside the walls of the NAV Center, they're agreeing to within the immediate neighborhood of the NAV Center. So if ESS staff finds that a NAV Center participant is using substances, a block away from the NAV Center in an adjacent parking lot, they're going to have the same consequences they would have if they were in the center itself. And then another piece that I think is really important to highlight is that case management, engagement in case management is a critical part of somebody being at the NAV center. And so, there may be a period of time where when they first get in the door that, their staff are working to make them feel comfortable and getting them used to all of the rules. And then over time, they're engaging them in case management. But that is an expectation of the participants of the NAV center that they are working towards that ultimate goal of getting into permanent housing. So it's not just about a bed for them to stay for the night. It goes beyond that, and it's how can staff really move folks out quickly to permanent housing. So when there is a violation of those rules, the primary focus of Equitable Social Solutions is to ensure that all of the participants in the program and their staff are safe and comfortable in that setting. Depending on what the rule violation is, there could be a different response. It could be, that there's a series of reminders around behavior. If it's a relatively, minimal violation of a policy, it may be staff just reminding them and setting, warnings, if you will, that, continuing this behavior could lead to you being discharged. More severe behavior violations will result in immediate discharge from the program. When those program exits have to occur, those meetings are always between the participant of the program and the management team of ESS. And the focus really is, how do we connect this individual to another safe location? And so whenever possible, it's working to see if there's another shelter bed at another program available. Having housing problem solving conversations of, is there family or friends that they may be able to go to, really taking all the steps necessary to keep that person from re-entering to unsheltered homelessness. And that includes, if another shelter bed is identified for them or another location that they can stay is identified, ESS staff work to transport those folks there. So whether that's LTD bus fare or taxi fare, the key is really how do they get these folks discharged from the program quickly while ensuring that they're not exiting back out to the street. So just further digging into what low barrier is and is not. So I think we've talked about several of these things already, but a low barrier does not mean that drug use or criminal behavior is allowed on shelter property, or in the case of the NAV center, even the immediate property. It doesn't mean that there aren't rules or expectations of participants. There's a myriad of rules and expectations for folks once they get in shelter that they need to meet. And it doesn't mean that just anyone who shows up at the door gets sheltered. As I noted, there's a referral process for the NAV center. It goes through Lane County Coordinated Entry. Someone can't just go knock on the door of the NAV center. So that really works to discourage folks from congregating outside of the NAV center, because that's not the way that you gain access. You have to be referred through the Coordinated Entry process. And really important nuance to note is, there's this belief that low barrier means that treatment isn't offered or encouraged, and that's just not the case. With the NAV center, not only is it offered and encouraged, but it can occur within the building. There's providers, which I'll share a slide here shortly, several providers that come on site to provide treatment to folks. And so it's just not mandated. It doesn't mean it's not encouraged. And I think you'll see from the data that I'm going to share about folks that exited the housing and have not returned to homelessness, that the services they've received in the shelter have been critical to them maintaining their housing once they've exited. And so treatment certainly is occurring within the walls of the NAV center. And just that bottom phrase, low barrier access, it doesn't mean that there's low expectations. The goal really is, how do we help this person move forward in their life? And so more just about the services that are offered on site. As I mentioned, intensive case management, basic needs, meals, hygiene, that includes shower, laundry, etc. Access to transportation, LTD bus passes. As I mentioned, sometimes taxis are used, especially if there's specific case management related appointment that someone needs to get to. One thing that I think the NAV Center is really successful at is ensuring that folks are feeling engaged with the broader community. One of the partners that they work with is the local YMCA, and so they're able to take NAV Center residents to the Y to engage in all of the services that are offered by the Y, and it really helps those residents to feel like they're a part of the larger community. They've also hosted several neighborhood cleanup events where residents of the NAV Center have joined business owners of the River Road area, neighbors, to help clean up the community. And I think that's helped to really just build that sense of community engagement. ESS uses a peer support model whenever possible, peer support being having staff with lived experience of whether that be lived experience of homelessness, substance use, mental health, living in poverty, and peer support has been shown to just be critically important in working with individuals that are experiencing homelessness because it allows them to build those strong relationships with support staff that can then help them to meet their goals. And I think the NAV Center has been incredibly successful as well in connecting folks to the Diversion program, which I've talked about to you all several times. So finding those opportunities for quick exits to housing that can happen with minimal or no financial assistance, and then pairing that with the folks that are getting referred to those permanent housing programs through coordinated entry, so our permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing programs. But always that goal, that end goal, is how can ESS and the NAV Center move their residents into housing as quickly as possible. These again, a handful of the partners that ESS works with, so they certainly are not doing this work alone. And again, just highlighting they have several entities that are coming into their building and providing these services on site as well. So I think the really important piece to dig into with any program when you're looking at any program is to look at their outcomes and the outcomes they're meeting, and in addition to that, the population they're serving. So looking first at the population being served by the NAV Center, this is over the last fiscal year. So a total of 170 individuals were served. And as you'll see, these folks have significant barriers to housing. 25% or 43 of those individuals are over the age of 55. 21% have a developmental disability. To me, these are staggering numbers. 92% of folks at the NAV Center have at least one physical or mental health disability, and 79% have at least 2 disabilities. More than half of the folks being served have experienced or survived domestic violence, sexual assault, or human trafficking. 69% have been on the street for a year or longer. So when you look at that length of time homeless plus the majority having a disability, that's that chronic homeless definition. So these are folks that have been homeless in our community and showing up in our system for a very long time. And then when you look at just overall vulnerability, so the coordinated entry assessment tool that we use is a vulnerability measurement tool that basically is measuring the likelihood of someone dying living on the street. And so that tool is utilized across all of the shelters in our system. And you'll see that the NAV Center, 43% of their participants are assessed with that tool as being highly vulnerable. When you look across all of our shelters, it's only 18% at any given shelter. So again, the NAV Center is serving those hardest to serve folks in our community that have been homeless the longest and have the highest barrier. And I think it's important to note too, there's a general misconception that individuals experiencing homelessness are not employed. And when you look at the NAV Center, close to 25% over the last year had at least one job. And I think that's especially important when you look at how many folks are over the age of 55, have one or multiple disabilities. Many of the folks at the NAV Center either are getting Social Security disability or are actively working towards that. And so, the employment's not always going to be the pathway for everyone at the NAV Center, but, there is almost a quarter of the individuals there that are currently employed. And again, low barrier shelter models, we're seeing it locally. We see it nationally, that's why it's a national best practice. Low barrier shelters have those better outcomes to housing, and that's reflected in the data here. When we look at exits to housing, again, ESS and the NAV Center are excelling in comparison to other shelters within our system. 95.8% bed utilization rate, that just is how many beds are vacant on a given night. When you're looking at a referral-based shelter, that's why it's not going to be 100% always, is that there's a process and time involved with getting a referral sent, but being at almost 96%, that's incredibly high. And when you look at other shelters in the system, that's still very high. I think most important outcome to look at is how many folks are getting exited to housing. So of the 99 individuals that were exited last fiscal year, 41% of those were exited to a permanent housing location. When you look at across our shelter system, the average is 25%. So ESS is far exceeding what the average is of our shelter system. When you look at a more stable living situation, so that encompasses those permanent housing destinations as well as other locations such as adult foster homes, sober living, other living situations that may not meet the definition of permanent, but are certainly more stable than an emergency shelter or being on the street. Their percentage there goes up to 44%. And then going back to what I was saying about the importance of the case management and services that are being offered at the NAV Center, when you look at the number of folks that were exited into housing, they are remaining housed. So at 6 months after exiting the shelter into housing, we see that 76.5% are remaining housed. At the 12-month mark, it's only reduced to 70.5%. And then within a year, folks that have been exited to housing from the NAV Center, we're seeing that under 6% of folks are returning to homelessness. And the measure or how we determine whether or not they've returned to homelessness is if they show back up in the Homeless Management Information System, HMIS. And so if they don't show back up in that system, then we're assuming that they have resolved their homelessness. And especially when we're talking about chronically homeless folks that have been in our system for, some of them for many, many years.
Excuse me,
Yes.
James, so they would show back in the systems if they went to another assistance facility or have contact with law enforcement? Is that how they would get on that list again?
Not contact with law enforcement. It would be if they went to another one of the system, the access points in our system. So that could be a emergency shelter. They could have contact with a street outreach team, a food pantry, one of our day access centers. And when we think back to the point in time count, we're seeing that over 90% of the folks that we're counting in the PIC count are already in the HMIS system. So it really is a good indication of who's experiencing homelessness in our community. So if someone's not in the HMIS system, they most likely are not experiencing homelessness in our community because they would have gone to one of those access points.
Yes, that's true.
So 170 vigils served, but it's 75 beds.
Right, that's 170 over the calendar year.
Right.
Total, so there's folks that exit out.
So how long was the average stay there? Did I miss that?
I don't think we included that data set.
I think it's around 7 months.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And you imagine there's a faction of people that will come in and leave within days. And then there's another faction of people that could stay for over a year potentially, but on average, it's about 7 months.
Yep.
Well, that was I didn't know that the length of stay was that long. That's kind of what I was wondering. At 170 people, 75 beds a night. Gotcha. Okay. What is the max they can stay?
So because of that needing to be engaged in case management, it's really there's not necessarily a maximum time. It's are they moving forward towards their goals of getting into housing? So is there a housing opportunity that's pending where it makes sense that they stay in the shelter a longer period of time? But they really have to be continuing to engage with staff and have a pathway to housing. So it's not going to be a permanent location that they can stay.
I don't
Commissioner
want to
Trigger,
derail
yeah.
things, thanks, but I mean, just as one example, somebody's in the process of applying for SSI or SSDI because Social Security income or Social Security disability income, and they need that income to pay for their subsidized permanent housing. That process can take
Yes.
3 times longer than what you just named as the average length of stay. So that is a barrier, for example, to housing that we have no control over, nor does that individual that extends their stay because they're waiting for the response
Yeah.
to that. That's an example, right?
Yes, thank you. And it is so variable. Each person has a different path to permanent housing. And so there's a check-in every 90 days to kind of see like what's going on. Let's talk about what the next 90 days might look like. And, if someone really isn't moving forward at all, then the next step might be talking about, okay, what's next for you beyond the shelter. But if folks continue to take steps forward and engage with case management, then they'll be able to continue to stay and work toward their goals.
So the concerns, that we're hearing, that I know you all are hearing from your constituents about the River Avenue neighborhood, there is without a doubt an increased number of folks experiencing unsheltered homelessness in that area. There has been an increase at least in the last year or so, and that means that community members are seeing more folks existing unsheltered, and so that means sleeping, loitering, at times panhandling. With increased numbers of unsheltered homelessness, you also often see increases in crime and theft numbers, visibility of folks openly using substances. So, we understand, and especially when you talk about the proximity to North Eugene High School, it's just slightly over a half a mile from the NAV Center to North Eugene High School. We certainly can understand why an increase in unsheltered homelessness in that neighborhood would get on the radar of community members and would be concerning for community members. We do hear regularly from members of the community, members of the River Road Neighborhood Association, Santa Clara Neighborhood Association, that despite all of those neighborhood concerns that are happening, the NAV Center really remains kind of a beacon in that neighborhood, or a place that they recognize is really working to address homelessness and taking positive steps to work to address the concerns that are happening there in that neighborhood. And these are some of those measures that folks, or that ESS has taken on. I know Commissioner Senega has been having a lot of these conversations with them, but there's a monthly community action committee meeting that occurs on site at the NAV Center. That includes NAV Center staff, Lane County staff, City of Eugene Police Department, the two neighborhood associations, and then it's open to any business or neighbor in the community that wants to come. And it's really just a venue to talk about any concerns that are going on and how ESS can work to address those. Over the last year or so, ESS has increased their security significantly. That includes now having security guard staff that walk the perimeter of the building to ensure that there aren't folks loitering, there isn't negative behaviors happening. And then there's also a kiosk that's in front of the NAV Center that when those security guards aren't out walking the perimeter, then they're in that kiosk just to try to deter folks from congregating. ESS staff has been absolutely amazing in engaging business owners and neighbors in conversations around how they can assist. So they've provided their direct phone lines for 24/7 access. So a neighboring business owner has a concern that they witness, they can call an ESS staff member who's going to walk them through what they can do, whether that's, in most cases it's going to be contacting law enforcement because ESS can't manage a property that's not their own, but they're going to work with that neighbor to look through all the potential options and assist them in any way to address those things. As I mentioned already, the community cleanup events, the Good Neighbor Agreement and behavior management, and then that neighborhood association engagement, both the River Road Neighborhood Association and Santa Clara Neighborhood Association chairs are members of that Community Action Committee. They show up monthly. They are very much engaged. And ESS goes to those neighborhood association meetings on a regular basis to just provide updates on what they're working on and to hear from those neighbors the concerns that they have. I'm going to skip over this a little bit for the sake of time, but over the last year, we see that ESS exited 39 individuals to homelessness due to rule violations. 5 of those folks were for violations of the Good Neighbor Agreement. So that means the rule violation occurred in the neighborhood and not in the center. Again, they work to connect folks as quickly as possible to moving out of the neighborhood, preferably to another shelter. And then a key point, when folks have been discharged from the NAV Center, they aren't eligible to be re-referred for 90 days. So that really is going to discourage those folks that have been exited from congregating in the area because they know that 90-day period has to expire before they're going to be eligible to be re-referred to the center. And depending on the severity of the behavior that was of their exit, it may be a longer period of time before they're going to be eligible to return.
James could take a break right there. Commissioner Tuger has a question.
Oh, thank you. It was on the previous slide. It's my understanding from my most recent visit, which was just last month actually, to the NAV Center, that there's an adjacent vacant property between the NAV Center and the next private property that ESS inquired about purchasing.
In the
I think it's
back of the building?
the Riviera Center Shopping, and they didn't want to sell it. So there's a vacant property that, basically, my point is, ESS is going above and beyond, in my opinion, what they're trying to do to create a perimeter that they can manage and control. Did you know about that, and was there?
Yeah. They, ESS had talked to us about, their efforts to purchase that property. And again, your point is very valid. They can control their property and the behaviors of the participants of their program. They can't enforce laws on or trespassing on property that's not their own. All they can do is work with those neighbors. And they really have tried to take steps to purchase those vacant properties, because they'd love to see that not be an area.
Have a
where
bigger
folks-
buffer around the center for the safety of their own, the residents and their folks. And that, and we can't use public funds to pay for security for private property, that's on the onus is on the private property owner, to do that. Okay, yeah, I think I have some other questions, but I think you're probably gonna cover them, so I'll wait and see.
James Vice Chair's got a question too.
We went over security a little bit, increased security. Do you know where it was at and what it is at now, what that increase level was?
So there was the initial kind of when complaints were coming shortly, like in the fall of last year, I think. And that's where the creation of the kiosk occurred, and then the perimeter walking. I think it's an ever evolving process, and so they're kind of taking the needs that are present and adapting to that. I don't have I can't say they've added this number of security guards. I know that they have 24/7 efforts to be secure, and they are working with those neighboring business owners around. Are there ways that they can get better lighting in their area and et cetera? But I don't have the exact numbers that they've.
Gotcha. But so they have 24/7 coverage. Sometimes it might be one, sometimes it might be two, depending on.
Correct, and then I think they pair that with the relationships they've built with those neighbors, where they are actively letting them know, if you see something, we can help to mitigate it to the, up to the point of they can't trespass someone from property that's not theirs, but they're going to do all they can to help them as well.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Forrest got a question.
Just a little bit of clarity on that. I met with Jared Haley and Keeley a couple of weeks ago. I think I told you about that. And Gary Walsh and I. So we spent quite a bit of time there, and they talked about their stepped-up security without actually adding different programs, but the stepped-up security as far as the patrol of areas outside of their facility. They tried to do it in cooperation, as you know, with the neighboring the owner of the strip mall, who's not present. And they don't always have the best reception, the best coordination with them. And I think that's an area that we have a great deal of opportunity, is to reach out to see if we can get the neighbors to actually participate more and understand, we'll get into this I'm sure, understand that most of the issues that they have are not with the residents of the NAV Center. And they're not very much different to the types of issues that we have, not just there, but in lots of different places around, not just Eugene.
Yeah.
It's all up and down the I-5 corridor. So that's a part of our opportunity, is not necessarily stepping up the security, but increasing the awareness of particularly that one neighbor who owns a strip mall. And I don't recall their name. It's I believe it's a California entity.
Yeah.
So I'm really, Jared is pretty amazing, and has a real deep understanding of what is going on around him.
Commissioner Trigger.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up, Commissioner Farrar. I was thinking that too. I'm sure Steve Gilbert would probably share, as another example, right? This is not a problem unique, and there's no navigation center by the Gilbert Shopping Center, and yet they have
But my house is by it.
those same issues, right? As far as, to your point. The other thing I'm glad you got to talk to Jared, because I hadn't. I just, this morning when he gave his comment, but I have talked with Keeley quite a bit, both on my visits there on the phone. The other thing about their security measures, Vice Chair, is that they're very aware of the contextual differences at different times of day. So they make a point, for instance, when school's in session, during arrival and departure time, when they know there's going to be more student foot traffic, to have a greater presence out on the sidewalk And I will also point out the school is across, though, is it 6 lanes of River Road? I mean, the school's on the other side, but they still are very aware of that. That was something that was really interesting to me to learn that they have a quarterly meeting, I think, with an EPD rep. They sort of have a person assigned them to troubleshoot, and so that they're tracking in tandem activity surrounding, really aware of their security measures.
Segue into my next couple of slides. So yeah, Lieutenant Sullivan with EPD is the lieutenant who is involved with the NAV Center, and his team worked to get us some data, which I'm going to share on the next slide. But there's just some additional factors in that neighborhood that are leading, we believe, and EPD believes, may be leading to this increased unsheltered numbers in that area. So last summer, the summer of 2024, there were several large encampments on the railroad tracks that were displaced, as well as just movement from various urban cores around the city of Eugene primarily, which just displaced folks and meant that there was going to be more visible unsheltered folks just in the community. As we've heard from the neighborhood association groups, this has been an area where there's been long-standing criminal activity that existed in this neighborhood, in this area, previous to the NAV Center. We've already been talking about the limited security on those neighboring properties. And then EPD, they have been incredibly helpful and really have partnered with ESS in incredible ways to address criminal behavior in the area. They had a camera cart for a period of time. They had increased patrols, and we were hearing from those neighbors that they were seeing a lot of improvement. EPD has been very transparent that their staffing challenges have limited their ability to maintain those efforts, and so really just continuing to encourage neighbors whenever possible to be advocating to EPD to increase those additional patrols. And then just in closing, this is data that was shared from EPD. These are related to service calls they've received related to quality of life or person crimes by calendar year. It's kind of blocked off by the screen sharing there, but you'll see in 2022, so in September of 2022 is when the NAV Center opened. And for that first year and roughly a half, you see that numbers stayed relatively the same, a little bit of a decrease in the overall calls for service. And then in 2024, there was a significant increase in overall calls for service, and specifically in criminal trespass calls. I think it's also important to note there was an increase in illegal burning. That's often associated with unsheltered homelessness. It's unlikely that a participant of the NAV Center would be participating in burning something illegally, because they could go into the NAV Center and get their meals cooked or get heat. So, assuming that that's related to that increased unsheltered population. And when you look at the fact that the NAV Center was open for almost a year and a half at full capacity from the moment they opened, it just begs the question, what happened in 2024 that led to this dramatic increase? And through the conversations we've had with law enforcement, with ESS, with street outreach teams, we really believe that displacement, that large displacement of folks the summer of 2024, just led to more visible unsheltered homelessness in the area, and these associated calls for service are likely to be paired with that. So there continues to be additional data analysis that needs to happen for sure, but just looking that the NAV Center has existed for a period of time without this major increase, to me is indicative that there were some other factors that were involved.
What was the area that those calls?
Sorry, so this is the map, which I know is hard to read. So this is EPD created this neighborhood map. So it's the Willamette River to Barton Street, east to west, and then Beltline to Owasso Drive.
So those calls for service this is the map?
Yeah,
Okay,
within this area, and then the red dot is the NAV Center.
Got it, thank you.
So just moving forward, there's continued improvement opportunities for ESS, continuing to work closely with neighbors, encouraging them to call EPD when a crime is being committed, ensuring the visibility of those security guards. I know Commissioner Senega, you and I talked about that in particular, just making sure that those security guards are seen whenever possible by the community. Continuing the neighbor engagement through those community meetings, through active involvement in neighborhood association groups. As noted by Commissioner Trigger, there is already a very strong relationship with EPD, with Lane County Sheriffs, and the Equitable Social Solutions, so just continuing to strengthen that. And then the reality is we continue to see increased numbers of unsheltered homelessness. We need to, find ways to pursue, funding for additional street outreach, shelter, and places for people to exist. Because when they don't have places to go, they're going to be existing in public spaces.
Thank you. The other thing that I think is important to note is when we think about the statistics that James shared, that the vast majority of folks, it was about 71%, have multiple disabilities, which also means they're not hanging out outside. When we think about that, it's not comfortable. It's not air conditioned, and it's just not where folks tend to want to be. And so just want to recognize that too, that folks hang out outside because they have to, because they don't have other options. And we also are hearing that the area, outside the urban core, unfortunately, we're just seeing more people exist outside of that urban core area, and that they feel like it's just a safer place to be when no other options exist. And so I'd like to present to you 3 different options to consider regarding the Navigation Center contract for operations. As James mentioned, there was a recent request for proposal for the operations contract for this current fiscal year. And Equitable Social Solutions was the top scoring applicant within that RFP among 4 different applicants. And so among the 3 options, there's one to approve the Navigation Center operations contract. And do that either today or at the July 22nd meeting. Another option being to fund the program operation contract, but then ask staff to explore moving the Navigation Center elsewhere. And then a third option in that commissioners may choose to direct staff not to move forward with the contract. And then in turn, the Navigation Center would be closed as absolutely soon as possible. So dig a little more deeply into those options around approving the Navigation Center contract and keeping the facility where it is. Some of the pros include just the fact that we have a very high needs related to sheltering within the community. Our last point in time count indicated that there were over 2,000 people who are unhoused on our streets across Lane County, and those are folks who were not in shelter. And then there were another 1,000 people who were sheltered across the region. We also have a great need for diversity of location for our emergency shelters. Folks often, have an idea of where they would succeed related to shelters. Some folks choose the urban cores, others choose to go in the more suburban areas. Some of it is related to safety, some may be related to where they get their needs met, where their doctor's offices are, where their pharmacy might be. And so the Navigation Center right now is one of the few shelters that are in the suburban area of the region as opposed to an urban core. We also really appreciate that Equitable Social Solutions has a strong relationship with the 2 neighborhood associations in the area, and it certainly has taken time to build that trust and that open communication and the regular meetings, and so would love to be able to continue fostering those relationships. There is also a 3-year covenant that is on the Navigation Center building because of the COVID funds that were used to rehabilitate the facility a number of years ago. That covenant goes through September 12th of 2025, and so it means that that facility cannot be used for any other reason than as an emergency shelter through that period of time. The other key factor is that Lane County currently receives dollars through Oregon Housing and Community Services for emergency shelter. And those dollars, at this point are prescribed by Oregon Housing and Community Services to Lane County, specifying what shelters we need to fund through our current contract. And so, of course, if we continue with funding the Navigation Center where it is, then those dollars also continue into this current fiscal year. Should we make a change either to the location or shut it down, then we don't know if those dollars would continue to come to our region and maybe transferred to another region. Con to this option is just recognizing that there are some neighbors who have real concerns about the Navigation Center and their community, and continuing as is may not allow them to feel heard or for their wishes to be met. Looking at the second option, this would be moving forward with signing the contract, but then also asking staff to explore moving the facility. Some pros there, again, is meeting the neighbor requests to move or close the facility, and recognition that maybe a better location or space does exist throughout our region. Some of the cons related to moving the facility is that it was costly to rehabilitate the old VA clinic into the shelter that it is now. It cost over $5 million a number of years ago, and those dollars came primarily from COVID funds. As you're well aware at this point, those COVID funds are gone, and as a county and a division, we certainly are seeing dollars continue to shrink, and so finding dollars to rehabilitate or to purchase a new building would be a real challenge. Noting the covenant, again, we are locked into utilizing that building at least through September as an emergency shelter. There will also potentially be a challenge in finding a space large enough for a 75-bed emergency shelter. The current facility is a little less than 9,000 square feet, and that's large, especially when we think about finding a space that is accessible to public transportation and to basic needs for folks. We also could potentially, with moving the facility, have a time frame where the shelter isn't actually open, and that would create a deficit of shelter beds for the community. And also recognition that even if the Navigation Center were to be moved, there would still be people who are unhoused within that area, simply because it is an area where folks are able to get their needs met and easily able to access LTD and other public transportation options. And then also, as I mentioned, the emergency shelter funding from the state is prescribed in our contract, and so there is a potential that we could lose the funding from the state if they weren't open to moving the facility as well. And then the third option being to not sign the contract and then to move to close down the shelter as soon as possible. Pros there, again, we do have some neighbors who are asking for the facility to be shut down or moved. And there is potential of saving dollars and investing those dollars in other ways to support people who are unhoused. Some of the cons, again, the building use covenant through September of 2025, it would definitely reduce the number of shelter beds that are available in the community. We have about 1,000 right now, and so that's almost 10% if those 75 beds were to go away. And it would also make it more difficult to be able to transition folks who are unhoused into housing programs. As James mentioned, one of the primary ways that the Navigation Center is utilized is if someone is lined up to get into a permanent supported housing program, for example, the Navigation Center is their first stop. And that allows our outreach teams to be able to know exactly where they are so that they can work with them each and every day to reduce their barriers, get all the paperwork set so that they can move into permanent housing as quickly as possible. When individuals aren't in shelter, our outreach teams spend a great deal of time just trying to track them down and understand where they are in the community, because it's very difficult for someone who's unhoused to find a place that they can be for an extended period of time. And then lastly, the state funding that would likely not be able to continue within our community. We had an incident last year where we thought that we had a shelter lined up down in Cottage Grove. That didn't work out, which is okay, but we did lose that allocation from the state, and it was then reallocated to another region in the state. And so we likely would not be able to move those 75 beds elsewhere. So thinking about the three options I posed, the staff recommendation would be option A, to direct staff to sign the Navigation Center operations contract. And that would comply with the existing restrictive covenant for the facility. It would help ensure that the funding remains stable and continue to flow into Lane County. We certainly would continue to work closely with the neighborhood associations and Eugene Police Department and Clark County Sheriff's Office to dig further into the data. As James mentioned, we do see that there's an increase in EPD calls that are notable, and so we want to learn more about that. And I know ESS is up for the challenge of seeing how they might be able to help address some of the challenges that are coming up. We also would sustain the continuity of services as well as the diversity of sheltering locale options within the community, and would continue to seek out additional funding, recognizing that the area certainly could use additional street outreach and options for folks to simply be where unfortunately at this point we just don't have the funding to be able to create those types of services at this point, but would certainly continue to pursue those. Any questions?
I see lots of notes being taken, so who wants to go first? Buck, go ahead.
Thank you. I just think before we start, I'll just declare a potential conflict of interest, even though this is for Equitable Social Solutions. I was made aware that St. Vinny's was one of the applicants, although they weren't chosen. So I don't think this is an actual conflict of interest, but I just thought I would at least put that out there. Overall, though, I'm very pleased with the statistics that you've been sharing with us. All the people that have been able to utilize the program and gone on to more permanent housing is incredible. That's incredible work. I remember when we, were able to acquire the building and renovate the building, and this was after we had the TAC report, the Technical Assistance Collaborative report, which came out, I think, right before I came on board. And it was such a key element in the continuum of housing options for people who were literally all over our streets. And everything that you've shown us today shows us that it's very, very successful. And that makes me very pleased to know that the investment that it took to renovate the building, staff the building, get people in, it's hard work. I mean, the folks that work there are just the hardest workers. This is, not the easiest folks always to work with, knowing that they're often dual diagnosed, multi-diagnosed, and they need a heavy amount of care. So I want to thank them for sure, because they deserve the appreciation from us. Without them, this work couldn't happen. I did also receive, I think most of the commissioners received a lot of those emails from neighbors that were concerned and who were seeing an uptick of homelessness in their area, and had negative encounters with some folks along the way. And we're correlating that specifically with the Navigation Center and thinking that these people were hanging out because of the folks at the Navigation Center. Although correlation does not mean causation. And that's an important element. I'm not sure if these folks have had a chance to be at these monthly meetings. I appreciated Mr. Wildish coming this morning and sharing that he's been participating on that for quite some time. And that's wonderful. Not everybody has that kind of time available. But it just means that maybe there's not enough outreach to the neighborhood. And I don't have the solutions on how to do a better way of doing outreach, not only to the neighbors, but as you just mentioned at the very end there needs to be more street outreach to those folks that are not being served by the Navigation Center, but are living in that neighborhood, in order to help reduce whatever negative interactions they're having with the community, while not undermining the success of the program as a whole. Thank you, Chair.
Vice Chair.
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to say thanks to James and Kate, especially James because he has to deal with me every time. But you know, you're always very helpful, and in your responses are thoughtful and factual. I don't know how much time we spent at that Navigation Center doing our tour. I mean, it was a good tour, and we went through every bit of it, and we hung out outside for an hour or so just to see kind of what the neighbors are talking about and dealing with. And I think it was good for both of us because James probably saw some of the concerns the neighbors are having as cars are pulling up and talking to us. And so when you watch this presentation, and the numbers are extremely impressive. I mean, Equitable Social Solutions is doing a great job, and as Commissioner Buck mentioned, their staff is just phenomenal. So I don't think anybody is against these numbers, but this outreach we've got to figure out if this contract gets approved, are there other sideboards, other ways of measuring success as far as knowing what our neighborhood complaints are, and if those neighborhood complaints are going down, not just the success in the building, because it is for the neighbors when camps are displaced and people do tend to congregate around that, it's hard for them not to put that correlation together. So I would like to go with one of Kate's recommendations about putting this off till July and linking this presentation, and because there's people that are watching it today, and then start to get feedback from this presentation and learning what some of the outcomes that are very impressive, and what does that do for people when they're weighing it. So I don't think if I wasn't in here, if I didn't have James to take me through the Navigation Center, I wouldn't know how great a work they're doing and what's coming out of it. So I do think a little more time to give people some of these facts that they don't know. They probably can't meet the meetings. I mean, Gary Wildish mentioned a lot of people just don't know what they even do there. So that would be the direction that I would like to go. Get a little more time with this new information that's out there. Do you know, Kate, you mentioned that do we know how many people stay in there all day in the Navigation Center?
No, I don't. I'm sure I can get that information though and get back to you, just a percentage.
Well, yeah, something that we could talk to people about, because I think that would really help. Saying, I mean, this is these people's home for this roughly 7 months, and they're in here most of the time. So that's certainly not the belief. People sleep, get up in the morning, leave, and they're the ones that. So those would be
Sure.
scenarios.
And I think, there's the folks who stay there, and then the folks who go about their day, just like I would, going to the library, going to the pharmacy, et cetera. And I think that's, that is a faction of folks as well. So I'll get more information.
Yeah, and that would be helpful to get to the two community organizations, Santa Clara and River Road. I mean, not everybody in those organizations are in support either. And I think they could stand to have some more of this information also.
Commissioner Farr.
Thanks. You know, when I think back on frequent user system engagement, when we first got involved with the Fuse, the numbers were pretty phenomenal. We had a 50% decrease in arrest by EPD, but that was 4 down to 2. So, you know, what we're looking at right now is exponentially, literally exponentially larger numbers that we're working with. We try to identify the 100 most frequent users of emergency systems with the Fuse. Well, now we have 75, probably of that 100, who are residential or have been residential in what is a proven system that does work, which is the navigation center. And I think we have issues that we do need to work through, clearly, because we have folks who believe the navigation center is the cause of what they see. But that's a typical response that we get. We received that, you may recall when we tried to open a boys' home in West Eugene. Everybody came out and started talking about all of the problems that the boys' home had caused. Well, it wasn't even open, you know? So, you know, people just have a misalignment of what is and what they think is. And if you don't know the facts, or you think you might know the facts, I'm not saying that this is 100% the case, but when you don't know the facts, you tend to speculate on what is the worst, and you build the facts that you want to see surrounding what is actually happening. So I'm citing Kate Pearl's words, and what Kate says is that we fail to see how adding another 72 homeless folks to the area will be a solution to the situation. Partnering with the River Road Community Organization, Equitable Solutions on volunteer cleanup days, and we will continue to do so. Well, I believe, as you've stated, that using the community organizations to help us with an outreach to the people who they can reach much more easily than any one of us can, to provide information regarding what potentially would be if we close the doors completely. And we had 72 people who were sleeping safely, soundly, and under care tonight, not doing so. And I think the other thing that she says is that local business owners are an integral part of our neighborhood and have our support. We want to see them thrive. Of course we do. We know that illegal behavior, trash and loitering on their premises, harms their business. The truth is, quotation marks around this, that these same behaviors and impromptu homeless camps have plagued the Beltline overpass area since long before the siting of the navigation center. That's documentable. And so linking those facts with what people need to hear, I think, is an important element. The other thing that is suggested is that asking in a different letter, asking the Eugene Police Department to be a little bit more proactive and potentially put surveillance in the area. Now, surveillance has a couple of benefits. One is you actually do the surveillance, you can see what's going on. But the second is surveillance is also a deterrent in a particular area. And now, I know you go to Yachts, and I know you know there's a police car on the south.
With a mannequin in the truck.
And I check my speedometer every single time because you know. So it is a real thing. It reminds people of behavior. It reminds people that of what they should and shouldn't be doing, what they wish they were doing that they aren't doing. So I think we have a number of things that we can address, and I'm fine waiting until July, as Commissioner Seneca stated, and that's one of the options that you've given. I'm not fine with closing the navigation center. I'm not fine with finding a different location for it. I think it's in the right place. I think it's in a place that can benefit us, not just because of the resources that we've expended, but because of the leverage of resources that we're bringing in with it. And I think that the key is to make certain that we, in any way that we can, involve the neighborhood in the actually seeing what is going on there. Now that's a weird neighborhood because the last county commissioner they elected was me, and I'm not their county commissioner. So
You remind me often.
well, but you know, I mean, so that being said, in effect they have two county commissioners now: the one they elected and the one who is. And so we can double our efforts and really be a part of what what we can, the facts that we can pass along. Now, we don't want to go in there and say, well, I know you don't like it because it's in your backyard. That's not what they want to hear. What they want to see and what they need to see is the real facts about what is happening there, what has always happened there, and that they're not alone, that Highway 99 in Fairfield is a hotbed right in my neighborhood, and it is a stone's throw from Fairfield Elementary School. So, this is happening every place. And the Navigation Center is the best thing we have ever done. It's the best thing we've ever done to address the issue. And we need to keep making it, we need to continue as such. I have a lot more to say, but, the River Road Neighborhood Organization sent a letter, John Belcher sent a letter, all of which have been deeply involved in the area. And they all say about the same thing: support it, keep it going, but help us with communicating to the neighborhood.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you for that. They have actually 5 commissioners, I would say, in that every single one of us cares about this issue and is responsible for the oversight of these decisions around the location. And in fact, they have emailed all 5 of their commissioners. I think, we rightly call it the Navigation Center because the emphasis in the presentation was on how we help these folks navigate a system that is full of barriers to their success, and yet we've managed to help so many of them succeed. And so even, Kate, when you talk about, shelter beds, yes, they're shelter beds, but it is the navigation services that really are ultimately the important piece of this program. And when we say another 72 or 75 people on the street, it's really 170 and counting, right? So there's just too much in this. I mean, I came into this presentation supportive of renewing, but now just even more so. Option 2 implies there might be other appropriate sites for such a facility. So I would support option A, little Roman numeral 2, which is approve the Navigation Center operations contract and explore additional sites if we think there are OHCS dollars in the offing next year, because we know it takes a long time to identify the site and rehab the site. And we need more navigation centers, not to get rid of the one that we have for a county of our size. So if we think there are actually properties out there that are appropriate for such a thing, I would love to see us exploring additional sites to get to the need for diversity of location, as was mentioned. I am absolutely sympathetic to and understand the challenges that some neighbors are presenting. As Commissioner Farr said, it's true out on near Fairfield Elementary, the Gilbert Center. It's true all along the Fern Ridge bike path. It's true a block across the street in the park blocks. It's true everywhere because we have a huge problem with homelessness, and particularly unsheltered homelessness in Lane County. And so while I'm ready to support a motion today, I don't mind pushing it off for 2 more weeks, but I have to ask what problem we're trying to solve for that waiting until the 22nd solves. So I would be happy to approve it today and have an assignment about working more intentionally to engage neighbors, working with ESS, working with the neighborhood associations on how to continue or expand on the outreach efforts and really the education efforts of the broader community about the benefits of a program like this. I would separate those 2 things out. I'm not opposed to waiting till the 22nd, but the issue before us is a timing of renewal of a contract. And the issue that Vice Chair raises about engaging the community and being more involved in coming up with solutions and better education is ongoing. And so I support us doing that and thinking about ways we can do that with some structure around it, that then it can come back to us with some real outcomes to report on what that engagement looks like, and even assignments for us and how to be part of that, right? But I would separate that out from the issue before us, the board order before us about the contract. So I'm ready to support approval of the contract today, and I'll still be ready to on the 22nd if that's when it's on the agenda.
Before your turn, may I say one more sentence?
If it's one more sentence, yes, we're running
It
short
is.
on time.
It is, this is a long sentence.
With no colons or semicolons, yeah.
So, back in, I think it was 2018, I made a presentation on Fuse to NACO. And it was me and the mayor of Baltimore, she had a presentation on front doors. And people nationwide were amazed at what we're doing with Fuse. And again, this is Fuse exponentialized, is what we have today. So if it was wonderful nationwide then, it's 10 times wonderful today. And imagine what they'd say if we made this presentation back there today. Long sentence, but that's.
Yeah, nice 9-sentence paragraph there. Awesome. A lot of great topics. I've got a couple specific questions because a lot of my questions were answered already. And thank you again for meeting with me privately and for producing a great slideshow, because that was not on your docket for this order, and that was just extra work you had to do. And so I personally appreciate that very much. I want to just say something about the 2024 question. I think I've got an answer for that. Now, I'm not saying I'm the nation's expert, but I do have serious skin in the game in the commercial market and that sort of thing in town. And I would hedge not my bet on the railroad encampments being the problem. What's happening, we're seeing right now, is we're seeing an absentee property owner problem. What we have in the block that we've changed in downtown Springfield was the reason it's a success is because people take ownership of the neighborhood. The property owners take ownership of the neighborhood, the tenants take ownership of the neighborhood, and they treat that as if it's their own. So there's eyes and ears and subtle enforcement and all of those things that go with it. What we're seeing with the Riviera Shopping Center, which I grew up as there's a kid way back a couple of days ago, it's struggled to be an on-site, on-eyes kinds of property. Secondly, if you look at 2024, it was one of the most difficult economic downturns in retail restaurant businesses in the last 25 years. So, the complaints we got for the breakfast place that was there and the bakery and those kinds of things, those businesses were suffering greatly already by mid-2023 into 2024. So, like I said, I'm hedging my bets that the release of the housing and the encampments by the railroad properties are really the causation of that problem. I would say it's basically the absent property owners. The exception of that is Steve Gilbert, who is an on-site, on-demand, on-eyes property owner who still suffers at $75,000 a year in property damages to his property. So I say all that to say there has to be something we can do as a county. The Eugene Police Department has a work session on this tomorrow. What kind of pressure can the county put on the Eugene Police Department to do what we consider a share of this issue? Because if your numbers are proving that the navigation center is not the problem, because based on your statistics, I already surmise in my mind how many people were staying there close to on a given day, and I'm thinking it's probably 56, 59, given the chance percentage of how many people you said had jobs and all that kind of traffic. I'd already figured that in my mind. And the value of the center being there for what the county's got invested is $257 a foot. I mean, that's an incredible commercial investment that the county needs to hold on to. So the knee-jerk reaction, and I'm sorry to say even to look for another space, I think it's not feasible. I think the investment we have there, what we have there is a serious asset that we need to hang on to as long as we can and do what we need to do with it. The question of whether this was a COVID expansion and whether we can continue that, you answered that in my private meeting. You said that we have state dollars to continue this thing, so it's not like the funding stream is going to fall off a cliff in the near future. We do have to use this until September. That's only a few more months, but we choose to use it for the highest and best use and the return on investment we get as far as those 70 people are concerned. So I say that to the public all concerned because I want to say that I believe now, with looking at the statistics, that the Navigation Center and ESS is doing all what they can do and what they should be doing. But the problem is we don't have what I would consider good partnerships with the city of Eugene to enforce a loitering problem that is a loitering problem, not a Navigation Center problem. So I guess the thing that I would want to carry back from the 22nd is what tactic for managing the homelessness was most effective in the past, and can we leverage that somehow for the future? And what decision can we make on the 22nd that we can actually do both? approve the contract for the navigational center with ESS, but also put a real teeth in place, a plan of teeth in place to handle the ancillary issues and not, in my opinion, do a board assignment in a committee and 6 months later, we finally get some sort of movement on it. I think we as a board could make a solid decision and put some pressure on the appropriate parties to make something happen to the better in a sooner fashion. I'm trying to say that really politically when I would just like to say it bluntly, but I can't. So I hope you got the meaning of what I was talking about. Any questions to kind of what I'm got in my brain here?
I guess what I'm hearing is thinking about what tactic has worked in the past to help address the challenges around houselessness and
In
what
that
might be
specific
possible.
area.
Okay, and then what might be possible in the future.
Yeah, because I mean, all of us get Citizen Karen emails, right? And Citizen Karen, I would think the first person I'd email this presentation to is that entity, whoever that is. Because, ever since I've been here, I've gotten emails about, I got a camper here, I got a camper there, and it's always in that area. So there's something that attracts people to that area. Is it loose public policy? Is it loose city ordinances? Is it toxic charity enablement, where the people of that area are always giving money and whatever to people with cardboard signs on the corner that perpetuate the problem of loitering? I don't know. But there has to be somewhere where we can, as you say before, separate the two entities and not confuse the two. Vice Chair.
To Chair's point, something struck me. You said that they go there to get their other needs met, the ones that are in. What other services are they getting there?
So when I had a conversation with the navigation center staff, they said that I think there's a library in the area.
I don't know about the library. I mean, I know that there's, what ESS has said is there's several businesses that cater to lower income folks. There's several fast food restaurants. There's some of those Keno lottery places. There's the dollar store. It's right next to Beltline, which is a major interchange. There's the LTD bus station. So there's folks there's reasons why unsheltered individuals may prefer that area, because there's access to things like food and cheaper supplies and things like that. I don't know. There may be a library too, but I'm not aware of that.
There is, but it's a few blocks north of there.
Yeah,
it's
but
not really a library.
No, it's not. I mean, there technically is a library in the area, but
I also heard just the lower cost stores. I think that is an allure, certainly.
Well, the other thing is it's centered between the Willamette Greenway and the railroad, Brown, whatever you want to call it, and those are attractants because people can be unnoticed there. So I think there's that. And it's not the only place that has that loitering. John Belcher made a suggestion. The Eugene Police Department has that tower cam that they move around. And that's one of the civilians relatively inexpensive because they already have it. He suggested just move it around every now and then and put it in places where the loitering occurs. We'd have to lobby them to do that. But it doesn't seem like a huge ask to me.
Yes, Commissioner Buck.
I'm happy to hear that everybody is largely supportive of the Navigation Center going forward. My question to the group is, although we've asked, how can we engage the community a little bit more, the board order in front of us is specific to the contract with ESS, and I'm not sure what the delay actually does in altering that contract. The contract is ready, and it sounds like we have support, but we have some additional work to do, and it sounds like we're committed to doing that. I would like to see us continue with the contract and move forward with that, and then do our follow-up work.
Go ahead. Sorry. No, you go ahead.
For me, the delay is I've been explaining to constituents that this presentation was coming. I would like to get their input after watching it. I mean, it's very well done and there's great information, and I think, I would just like to have more outreach before I vote on it.
Commissioner Trigger. then I'll go with Eve.
I just had a thought that, I don't think I'm proposing putting together a committee or anything. We used to have joint elected official meetings. We haven't had one in a long time. And a lot of these issues are actually other jurisdictions' issues, City of Eugene's, LTD, so on. So to what we've already been talking about a little bit, but to the last exchange is, as Commissioner Buck points out, the contract that's going to come to us in 2 weeks isn't going to look any different. I don't know how much outreach is going to happen in 2 weeks, and really outreach is ongoing. So I'm wondering if that isn't the right next step, is to try to organize some kind of joint elected officials interjurisdictional meeting to discuss that area in particular. It's just a thought.
Ms. Gray, please.
Thank you. So just as clarification, the contract with Equitable Social Solutions expired on June 30th. They are operating without a contract and with good faith belief that they will be compensated for the work that they are doing now. And I have full confidence that this board will compensate them for any work that they do, regardless. It sounds like there's support for the contract, but and I'm seeing head nods, which is helpful then for Kate and James to go back to ESS if the decision is to push off to the 22nd and assure them that they will receive compensation for the 3 weeks of work done without a contract. Though approving it today certainly would seal that in and make it easier in terms of our relationship with them.
And with the contract, that's only a year based on the slide. Would that be from the previous date of July 1? So if we waited 2 weeks, we'd be basically approving an 11-month contract, so to speak.
It would
Retroactive.
Well, that's what I'm saying, but I mean, as far as, we would have 11 months to kind of reassess.
Correct.
If we want to change something in 11 months, that's what I'm meaning, yeah.
Correct. We won't go out for RFP in a year, but we do rely on identifying what the state funding will be every year before we re-up a contract. So we could certainly bring it before you in a year.
Commissioner Ford?
An important element here is giving people the impression that you are listening to them, that you didn't just listen to them, we're going to do this anyway. So delaying 2 weeks gives them an opportunity to re-initiate whatever concerns they had, and perhaps using this presentation to give them some more response. So I see a true value in that. And I also see a true value in giving ESS the peace of mind that they have a contract. So that's kind of what I'm juggling in my mind. Every time a government body has a public hearing in the same meeting, passes the order that the public hearing's about, it feels like, well, you've already made up your mind, why have the public hearing? Well, you've already made up the mind, why have the presentation? So that's the issue there. If we can grapple with that and convince people that no, whether or not we made up our mind, we have an action plan moving forward from this, based upon this presentation, that we're going to reach out and we're going to address some of the very specific issues that you have, including loitering and including burglary or whatever it may be. But I guess that's what I'm grappling. I'm fine going with it today. I'm fine waiting 2 weeks, and I see the value in both. And Eve, I guess I'd look at you.
Ooh.
And this is my question: how nervous is ESS right now that they don't have a contract?
Well, I feel good that I saw head nods, and I think I saw 5 head nods that everyone here supports paying a contractor for work done.
Yes.
So I think we can go back to ESS and let them know that regardless, they will be paid for the work that they have done. And if it's the will of the board to then push the actual decision to the 22nd, we would just know that we're giving ESS that sense of comfort.
Okay, that answers my question. Now, if I were ESS, I'd still be nervous, but probably no more nervous for 2 more weeks than I am today, because I don't have a contract today either. So, so that being said, I do see a value in allowing people to understand that we did have a deliberation, we had a discussion, and that part of the next 2 weeks is the beginning of action that we're going to take regarding response to their concerns. If indeed we are prepared to do that, and we can do that. And I think we have a means to do it. And we've heard from Belcher, we've heard from Pearl, we've heard from Wildish that a part of the cleanup can be a part of the outreach. They do it every month. They go out and clean up, and those organizations can be a part of the outreach. Yeah. So somebody make a motion and I'll vote.
Okay, we took the words out of our mouth. Vice Chair, you want to make a motion?
Well, do we need a motion to move it to?
Well, we do have a board order in
Put it-
front of us, so we do need to do some decision on it, yes.
I
I think you can just give us, I think you just
Or
give
do
us
you want
head
to
nods
push
to
it?
put it on the
Move it off.
meeting
Move it
on
off?
the 20th.
If that's what you want, yeah.
All right, then I will suggest, based on head nods of the board, we move item 9-1, order 25070810, in the matter of approving the contract action with Equitable Social Solutions for the Navigation Center operations to our June 22nd meeting, if we have head nods to do that.
July 2nd.
July, sorry. Running on 36 hours of jet lag here, forgive me. Okay, looks like that's what we're gonna do. James, again, Kate, thank you again
Thank you.
for your deep dive into this, and Eve, thank you for your insight. Appreciate you guys very much for what you do.
Thank you, James and Kate.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, we're gonna move along to our number 10, our public works items, which is a first reading and setting a second reading in public hearing on ordinance number 2505, and we may have some exchange of folks coming in before we get ready to do that. Looks like suits are coming in and ties. There you go.
I don't think so. Yeah, we'll be on that because it's just your first reading and then we can see what it is.
Wherever you're comfy.
All right, as we get settled, let me say that our next item is the first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing for ordinance number 2505 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 9 to adopt new provisions related to the Oregon Recycling Modernization Act, deleting and replacing in its entirety 9.005.10 and ordinance 9.015.005. With us today, we have Mr. Jeff Orlandini. I just like saying that name, sir. It's a great name, rolls off the tongue. Greater Waste Management Division Manager to introduce the item. So Jeff, take it away, please.
Thank you, yes, appreciate it. I'll be relatively brief as this is just to do the first reading and set for the second. So the board is being asked to approve ordinance 25-5 to adopt the new provisions related to the Recycling Modernization Act to comply with Oregon revised statutes and Oregon administrative rules which set forth requirements related to recycling and solid waste management. The Oregon's recycling laws require the division to implement recycling programs, and Oregon's base recycling law is the Opportunity to Recycle Act, which the Oregon DEQ most recently amended in 2021. DEQ regulates local governments' recycling, waste prevention, and reuse programs. In 2022, the Oregon legislature passed the Plastic Pollution Recycling Modernization Act. This act updated Oregon's aging recycling systems and policies by leveraging resources from producers of plastic, paper, and food serviceware products. The amendments being proposed to Lane Code Chapter 9 align with DEQ's definitions and the requirements outlined in Oregon revised statutes and Oregon administrative rules that have been updated as a result of the new law. So essentially what we're asking is we're recommending that the board moves this item onto a second reading and public hearing so that we can adopt those same new language. It's a lot of the language change so that we're in compliance with the new Oregon Recycling Modernization Act. And that's all I have to introduce it.
Great, you were right. That was brief. Good job. Is there any questions for Mr. Orlandini on the board? Yes, Vice Chair, please.
Who do we picture this affecting, the changes?
So, in terms of affecting, I mean, really, as we've looked at it, the impact is really the opportunity to recycle more both in our carts and at what are called depots. And so, in terms of that, it's a positive in terms of being able to recycle more. The funding comes from the producers of the materials. In order to help with the modernization of those recycling systems and allowing that. I would say also that a big part of it, we'll talk about on the next item as well, a little more in depth, is some of the equity around living in a rural community typically you have less items you can recycle. Cottage Grove, for example, has less items, that they could put in their recycle bin than someone in Eugene. And this act serves to allow everyone to be able to kind of recycle the same materials across the system no matter where they live.
Okay, good deal. Commissioner Buck, did you mention that? Okay. Well, this is simply the first reading, we're here to discuss just a little bit, but the public will also be invited to be a part of the reading and the public hearing. So I'm looking for a motion to approve this first reading and move it to a second reading at a time certain.
Chair, I move to approve the first reading of ordinance 2505 and set a second reading and public hearing for July 22nd, 2025 at 1:30 p.m. time certain.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Great, thank you. Vice Chair made the motion to approve the first reading and set the second reading time certain July 22, 2025 at 1:30 p.m., seconded by Commissioner Buck. Is there any discussion to the motion? I believe this is an ordinance. Do we roll call on this, or can we just do an aye?
We're not.
No, it's not.
Okay, right, okay, good deal. So let's just, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. And then we have one more item with Mr. Orlandini, and that's Order 25070811 in the matter of accepting funding from Circular Action Alliance. So, Mr. Orlandini, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Yes, so we'll take just a second to get, I have a relatively short presentation that I think will help answer some of the questions too, and kind of talk about how we arrived at the point in time that we are now with the Recycling Modernization Act, and then briefly kind of give you an overview of what we're asking for today from the board. I gotcha, thank you. Okay. Okay, there we go. So this is gives you a little bit of a snapshot of kind of the calendar of events that got us to where we are. And so we're really in the implementation process at this point, so kind of towards the July 1, 2025. Some of the key work that's happening right now as we speak, at our level, is that we're creating outreach templates that we can use in the community. We're confirming collection services align with what's called the Uniform Statewide Collection List. So that's kind of like I was talking about, ensuring that we're able to have the same collection across the county. And then we're training local staff, coordinating infrastructure needs, and then we're updating contracts to reflect the new list. And then coordinating a regional marketing and communications plan with cities and their licensed service providers. And most of this work, if not all of it's being done in our waste reduction program within Waste Management, led by Angie Marzano. And so she's on vacation, so that's why I'm here, but really she should be presenting this and is the expert in there. So I will do my best to fill those big shoes. So brief explanation of why the Recycling Modernization Act. So these are on the left, kind of some of those goals. So designed to standardize what materials are collected for recycling statewide through that uniform statewide collection list. Reducing confusion for households and businesses, and improving those recycling outcomes with consistent education and program design. So again, I take calls all the time, and Angie takes calls all the time of people moving here from different places and saying, I could do this here, why can't I do that there? Oh my gosh, you take so much, this is amazing. And then even within our own community, people moving from one city to another and not having the same level of service. So trying to make that more equitable. It also provides statewide infrastructure investments to ensure recycling is accessible across rural and urban communities. It should be noted that the new law became effective in July 1 of this month. So it's already in place. Folks are already able to place more materials. And of note, and we'll talk about it in a minute, is that that's still, it may feel different to someone in Eugene than it does to somebody in Cottage Grove or somebody in Florence because of the inequities previously in what you could recycle. So I think that's of note. Some folks like, we want more stuff, and others are like, this is amazing because you added 15 items, what I could put in there.
It's more regionalized than that. You can recycle more in South Eugene than you can in Bethel.
Right, even in, yeah, right. And so trying to, stop that from happening. So the new system reduces that confusion by standardizing that list of recyclable items, having more clear, consistent recycling education and signage. I will admit that, it can be confusing right now for folks as we make that change, and, people are like, well, the pizza box could go in, they said here, but I've never done it here, and I just can't, seem to want to put that in there because it's always been a no-no. And so it can be confusing as it takes place and the education program sets in. And then we talked about the rural and underserved areas, being able to see expand access. And then one of the key things it's doing as well is upgrading those facilities. So a lot of our recycling facilities were never really designed to take a lot of these materials. We used to send all these, as most of you know, to China, and then China kind of shut down that program, and we realized we didn't have a lot of places really close to us. And so this is trying to help with funding some of those upgrades to facilities so that we not only can put those in our bin, but that we know they're actually being recycled, and which is key. And then so that's capital improvements and processing infrastructure, and then also making sure that the folks that are working in those facilities are working in a safe and clean environment. So these are the three big ways. So responsible end markets, talk briefly about, ensuring that we know that these materials, when they're recycled, they're going to responsible end markets and maybe not being, considered contaminated and being thrown away into the landfill. They're going where they should go, that aren't harming people or the environment, here or abroad. And that was part of why China shut it down, was they were saying, you're giving us a bunch of contaminated stuff, and we shouldn't be taking that. Social equity, we talked about the workers that handle the recycling are in safe jobs, getting a living wage, and requiring, those producer fees to cover the cost of meeting that goal. So what we're really asking for today is that we're able to sign these contracts in order to get reimbursed for costs that we expend through this new system. So here's the recycling guide. Again, it, depending on where you live, this could look like a lot more products. Other places could look like not so many new ones. Some of the things you look at, like the metal, there are metal things like that, pot in the back that you were not able to, shouldn't have been recycling before, and can now. A lot of the plastics, so that's really been expanded in terms of, I remember when my hauler was like, oh, now you can do like a particular milk jug. I was like, that's so cool, I can bring that one milk jug back again. And now I'm like, thankfully, now we kind of get back closer to kind of what we were used to, being able to have a lot more of the plastics. And that's what we hear a lot from the community about plastics. And then, the cardboard cartons, and then more paper. And so this is looking at what we can put curbside. Depots have things like the scrap metal, the big pieces of metal, motor oil, yard debris, things like that we take at our, most of our transfer stations already. And so the requirements, it's cities based on size have to have so many depots that people could then go to recycle more materials.
Jeff, what's that bottom slide say? It's pizza boxes must be wet?
What is it? That's a good question.
Sorry.
With no food residue.
No food residue? Oh, gotcha, okay.
Yeah, so what we've heard is that, very little, it's okay having all your crust sitting in there with it, not okay, right? Or chunks of cheese on it, not so much. Little oil, okay.
Hey, Jeff, when I said that about Bethel, we don't have composting. That's not recycling. That's different, isn't it? Composting.
Yes, I would say, composting would be different than recycling,
You have 3 bins, don't you?
Yard waste, compost, yard waste and food scraps, recycling, trash.
Right.
Okay.
And then glass usually is like
So it's
for.
part of recycling,
Yeah,
but
but
yeah.
it's the,
Food scraps can go in your yard waste.
In your yard
Yeah.
waste.
yeah,
It's bio.
Oh.
in Eugene and Springfield, yeah.
What goes to your chickens?
push it harder. Okay, so this is getting at some of the, these funding agreements and talking about that. So essentially, the Circular Action Alliance is the primary funding agreement. So they're the third party that's collecting the monies and then paying the jurisdictions and others that are providing the services. And so they fund and support governments, recycling system upgrades, as well as anything that we need to do internally with waste management. They fund that. They reimburse for eligible costs related to that collection and education, which is pretty nice. So education is something we've been doing for years and responsible for. And so having some more funding for that's been great. And then, outreach and contamination reduction efforts being covered by that as well. And so for us, that can come down to things like, if places need new forklifts so they can take more material, if they need different boxes to be able to take that. For us, it could be some of the operations costs for just the actual increase. And a lot of what you can take are bulkier items now. And so they're going to fill up a lot of our boxes quicker with the bulkier plastic. So we may need to be transferring those out of our transfer stations more. So it'll reimburse us for expenditures like that. Okay, so that's the presentation. I'll go ahead and just escape out of there. I don't know if that helps with. Okay, so what we're asking is to approve the reimbursements that Lane County is eligible to receive under the new provisions related to the Recycling Modernization Act. The system-wide updates will allow Lane County to better collect, transport, and manage the uniform statewide collection materials. These investments, as we talked about, could be things like on-site compactors to help allow us to compact more material, get more material per truck, forklifts, containers, staff resources to manage acceptance as well as possible contamination. These needed investments allow us to comply with the new law. Estimates on funding reimbursements based on preliminary needs assessment for Lane County are valued up to $4.2 million payable through those reimbursements. I say up to because, there's a lot of, as we're learning and implementing this, we're learning a lot about what you can and can't use. What we've been very good at, and the royal we, so what Angie and her team have been really good at is really communicating with this group to say, if we do this, will we be reimbursed? So we're not spending funds that, extra funds that we're not certain that we're gonna get reimbursed for. I think that's key, is that these agreements will allow us to get reimbursed. They don't have expense associated with them because we ensure that we're gonna get reimbursed for those before we spend that money. So we are recommending that the board accept the funding from the CAA for recycling system expansion investments to comply with state recycling and solid waste management laws. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the chair and the board for any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Rolandini. Appreciate that presentation. And Ms. Marzano's absence, you did a great job.
Trying.
Questions from the board? Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Yeah, first off, Bethel and South Eugene have the same system.
Okay, good.
Retract that. So the, both inside the Eugene city limits, parts of Bethel are not. Regarding the user fee, it seems to me that it's going to be more expensive to do this. The grant, is that going to cover the entire cost, or would we anticipate that at some point the haulers would pass along an additional fee?
So the haulers don't see an increased fee. The way the system's set up is it's coming from the producers of the materials. Mm-hmm. So if there was ever to be a pass-through, it would be on the actual materials at purchase point.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Then, so the anticipation is that that would be in perpetuity, that there would never be a pass-through.
Not if by pass-through you're meaning that it would be associated with the waste fees or hauler fees, because the haulers also are eligible to get this money for upgrading. So for example, in Cottage Grove, that hauler should be getting reimbursed for upgrades of their equipment so they can accept more materials curbside.
Okay, good. That answers that question. The other thing that I had a question about is regarding the actual order that we're looking at. delegating authority to the county administrator to execute all resultant agreements and addendums. And that kind of goes along with the last question, all resultant. That means that if we pass this, whatever the resultant agreement or addendum is, we have no option. We've given the administrator the full spectrum of authority to do that.
To sign any agreement that would be in relation to the Recycling Modernization Act in order for us to get reimbursement, yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That seems kind of vague to me.
Yeah, and one of the issues that we're having is it's a brand new program, and so the CAA is saying, you know, we're going to reimburse for these types of things, and then there could be changes down the road to how they reimburse those. But I understand the concern, and with some of the newness of it, we did try to write it in a way that would allow us to quickly be able to enter into an agreement to get reimbursed for applicable costs.
I'm still nervous with that line, all resultant agreements and addendums. That, there's no restriction on that in the order that we're passing. It could be any resultant agreement or addendum. So ease my fear, please.
Yeah, I would just say that, again, with it being such a rapidly changing environment with a brand new third party, not brand new to this industry, they've been doing it in other places, but to Oregon coming on, that really what we're trying to do is ensure that we are able to quickly get in line to get reimbursements or to add service if we can and add items real time. We certainly could change that and come to the board every time that there's a change to that, you know, to ensure that the board is on board with doing that. But again, I think so far what we have seen is there's no indication that there's cost associated with it. It's reimbursement, so this is all about us getting paid for services provided.
Funding agreements and addendums. And that sounds like a forever thing where you've got the authority to change it whatever the addendum or funding agreement may say, which we don't necessarily have control over, any kind of control. They could come forward with an addendum or a funding agreement. I'm not saying that we've seen this in the past, or that we might see it in the future, but what's the sideboard on this? That's not my expression. Somebody said that sideboard earlier, so.
What are you pointing to, Mr. Bovet?
Yeah, and I'm
Mr.
looking.
Barr? Okay, go ahead.
I'm looking at the actual
It's a discrepancy in the title.
order, and it says delegate authority of the county administrator to execute all resultant funding agreements and addendums related to future system expansion investments. So it's broad, and it's in perpetuity.
But within the context of SB 582,
Right. It is in the context of SB 582.
Where does it say that here?
in the order description in the matter of accepting funding for recycling system investments from the passage of the Recycling Modernization Act, SB 582, and delegating. So that authority
I
and
see that
those
up there in
future
the
contracts relate
title,
to. Yeah.
So, Rob, you can assure me that any resultant funding agreement or addendum would absolutely be referral to an existent, already passed law that will not change.
Well, I don't know if they changed to SB 582, potentially. Well, actually, then I would think we would need a new order, because resultant means resulting from what you just said.
Very specific.
Which is 582.
That is the reassurance I was looking
Yeah.
for.
That's what I'm saying,
All
yeah.
right, good. It's on record.
But it is still broad in the way you talk, but within the confines of 582.
And I would think if we were going to execute any new contracts or amendment language, that would go through your office.
Yeah, it would have to, even if Steve has delegated authority to sign these under 582, they all go through our review. But it doesn't come to the board. I think the question really is whether or not the board wants to see all of these.
It's like hearings official referrals, isn't it?
Let's not go there. Let's
Okay,
not
well,
go
it's the
there.
same thing, you know, it's the same kind of thing. Do you want to see all of them?
Yeah.
Or if by saying you don't want to see any of them, well, some of them that we should have seen
Yeah.
go through. And you're reassuring me that, no, that's not going to happen.
Well,
There's
at
nothing
least
that we should see.
they'll all be subject to both legal counsel review and county administrator review under 582.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Commissioner Buck, you still had a question?
No, I was just going, that was the point that I was likely going to make was, it's not like these things are gonna go through without any expertise reviewing them, and that helps me feel good about them, but I'm also interested in getting reimbursed, because we are required to implement many of these things, and if we don't go through with this board order, we likely won't be reimbursed for them, and so that's key.
No roller haulers for their upgrades requirements. All right, any more discussion or questions? I'm looking for a motion.
Go ahead.
I move to approve Order 25070811 in the matter of accepting funding from Circular Action Alliance, the Producer Responsibility Organization for Recycling System Expansion Investments from the passage of the Recycling Modernization Act, SB 582, and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute all resultant agreements and addendums.
I'll second.
I have a second. I have a motion by Vice Chair and a second by Commissioner Buck to move approval and acceptance of Board Order 25070811 as presented. Is there any discussion to the motion?
I'm not ready for a yes on this, so go ahead.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm assuming delegating that authority doesn't preclude the administrator from bringing something before us. It just doesn't require that they do.
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you.
It also doesn't preclude legal counsel from saying, no, don't sign this.
And it doesn't preclude the funder from saying, oh, by the way, your funding's been cut in half,
Right,
which we've seen in our legal system.
yes. Certain state agencies in particular, yeah, and federal agencies now.
And if they do, what do we do?
That is a challenge.
So is the discomfort, Commissioner Farr, just in the future, just lack of knowing? Is there something we should add to the motion to see if there's a communication avenue for the board to be informed on future things?
I don't think it could be done on the fly like this, and I think that we need to move forward with this. That being said, we have seen the state say, okay, it's all yours and we'll fund it. And then they say, oh, by the way, we're not going to fund it like we said we were going to fund it.
It usually happens in a trickle.
In a trickle. But at some point the monkey's boiled, right?
A funded mandate becomes slowly an unfunded mandate.
Yeah.
And then there's no guarantees on any of these.
Right. So there's no guarantee on this becoming an unfunded mandate. And, well, we're fine with that, and we're fine with that.
Commissioner Deere?
Well, I just want to make sure, but the delegated authority to future actions doesn't have to do with, I mean, right now what we're saying is, yes, please, we'll take the money that you're offering for this cost that you're requiring we incur. And so on. So if the issue arises that you're mentioning, which has precedence, approving this order and that fact are not connected to one another. I mean, the law will still be the law, whether there's funding for us to implement it or not, right? I'm just trying to tease apart what your very valid concerns about potential future funding for a program that we're mandated to deliver on from this particular order as it stands today. That's what I'm trying to understand.
And the concern that I have is a law that is currently funded would become unfunded, but still a law.
Right.
And I don't see a protection on that.
Right.
But this is not the only time that it's been done, and it's not something that we have control over once it's allowed. And I don't want to put Steve or his successor in the hot seat of making ridiculous, unwinnable decisions. So.
Understood.
But we probably aren't, so I'll go ahead.
Great discussion.
Put it all.
Good point. All right, heard discussion on our board order. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of passing Board Order 25070811 in the matter of approval and acceptance of the Circular Action Producer Responsibility Organization order before us, signify with an aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0. Nice pinch hitting, Mr. Orlandini. Well done. Thank you, sir. Well, that concludes our business, regular business of today. We will recess until tomorrow, Wednesday, 9 a.m., right here in the Board of County Commissioners rooms. But first, I will read us into executive session number 3. It's okay, I just like a little runway when I introduce things. I want to get everything done. The Board of County Commissioners will now meet in one executive session. The session is to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection and to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602F and ORS 192.6602H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All of the members of the audience are precluded from attending. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. Members of the news media are not allowed to tape, video record, or otherwise record an executive session, and verbatim notes are prohibited. No decision shall be made in executive session. We are recessed for 5 minutes. We'll meet back here precisely at 3:30.